How's it rockin', Dween Nation? This is the Dween Sports Podcast. We're about to get underway. But before we do, we'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe, or share. We are posting weekly sports content, and we want to build up the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy.
Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Pius, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and we're talking starts and sits of Week 16 of the NFL season. The week before fantasy championships, you got to get the win this week to jump yourself into the big money, into the grand stage with the trophy. You see it at the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel. It's your way. We're here to help you do that with our starts and a couple sits as well. But before we dive into all of it, how you doing, Genoa?
Yo, Dween Nation. A little bit of a bitter take here, Justin. It's the second to last week of fantasy, or third if you guys play into week 18. Justin and I, we love fantasy football, man. This is kind of how we kind of started watching football, was because of fantasy football. And, man, it's second to last week. It'll be a while before Justin and I are able to get into some mock drafts because we still got to wait for the draft and free agency to kind of all settle down. And so these are our last couple episodes of fantasy, Justin. And so maybe we can have a fantasy awards episode, which will be fun. Maybe, but, we aren't able to do anything else until the Super Bowl and free agency and draft. So, we're definitely excited to get to the NFL playoffs very soon, but a little bit of a bittersweet episode just because this is our one of the last few episodes of fantasy. And we love fantasy football, but we'll make the most out of it. But doing good there, Justin. And we're going to help everybody that's left remaining out there in Dewey Nation to win their semifinals week. This weekend, we'll know who is going to be headlining their fantasy Super Bowls, their fantasy championships. I know a lot of people are now kind of finding out who's their last place. And so, bittersweet episode. However, we're going to end it off with the bang. And Justin and I have some pretty juicy starts and sits. And I'll let Justin kind of start things off and with his quarterback, which I'm interested in hearing.
Yeah, no, and before I dive into the quarterback play, I just kind of like a PSA I want to say to the fans, to everybody who could be potentially watching. Yes, people don't make the fantasy playoffs. People lose in the fantasy playoffs. Doesn't mean you have to check out. There's DFS. You can still make your money there. There's so many other things you can still do that we can help provide you with. And if you have any suggestions too, hey, send them our way. We'll make episodes about anything you want to hear about. So it's not like, I mean, it is sad. I agree. The last bit of fantasy football, like that juiciness there of, week by week starts and sits and bold predictions, all those things, are coming to an end, going into the playoffs and the next season. But also we will also be here to set you up, because fantasy football to me is a 365-day lifestyle almost. And it's just fun. It's all fun every single day. But anyways, let's get to those starts and sits to help you win your fantasy matchups. And at the quarterback position, I got a sleeper, you would have to call it. But I think after this week, Michael Penix Jr., the new starting quarterback for the Falcons, is going to show off exactly what we've been waiting for. Unfortunately for the Falcons, they're going to have to spend a lot of dead cap for Kirk Cousins next year, because after this week and after how this season concludes, they're going to know that Penix is their guy rest of the season, or for their franchise moving forward. I think he's going to have a great game. We just saw the almost second place MVP Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP, go for 5 touchdowns against the Giants last week on the road. Now we have the Falcons hosting the Giants, and I think not that anybody in the Falcons locker room is down or like disgruntled with Kirk Cousins, but you get a new guy leading the offense. There's a new motivation, there's new momentum, there's new hope, and I think Penix is a guy that you might be very cautious with starting because, hey, it's his first game. I'm in the semifinals, but I think he is going to be a guy that lights it up, and I think he's going to be a great play.
Yeah, Justin, this was a guy last year in college who nearly won the Heisman and nearly threw for 5,000 passing yards there. Unbelievable there. 36 touchdowns last year. And you know what? He has a similar skill set, right? He had Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk. Who's the other guy? I'm blanking. McMillan, that's right. But now, Justin, he has Drake London. He has Kyle Pitts. He has Mooney, and then he has Bijan out of the backfield there. And you know what, Justin? I love this a lot from Michael Penix Jr. Now, when we, start off the offseason, it was that big signing there with Kirk Cousins, and we questioned it, right? It was a fit, but not all the way a fit. It's one of those shoes, Justin, that you kind of worn in the past couple of years. You rediscover them, you kind of put them back on. They hurt a little bit, but you can go about it with the day. They fit for a couple days, but then you realize, okay, this weekend, I know it's Tuesday or Wednesday, but this weekend, I'm going to need to get a pair of shoes. But this will do for right now. But, Justin, it's time to give up those shoes, and now it's time to go to the store. You've saved up all this money. You bought those other pair of shoes, and, people were asking, why did you buy those pairs of shoes when you had these? Well, this is why. Now, Michael Penix Jr. is now the starter. And, Justin, I don't think they're looking back here, Justin. This might be the end of Kirk Cousins there. The number 8 pick overall there, who could have been a Raider, but he's a Falcon. But I like Penix there. Not to mention he has pro-like experience because, Justin, he was in college in 2018 all the way to last year playing in the national championship. So this guy has a big pedigree. And not only that, Michael Penix Jr. has been through all depths of, animosity, sadness, sorrow. I think he tore his ACL twice in the last couple years. And so he's battle-tested, battle-ready, and he's going to do just fine in Atlanta. I think he fits in this scheme there with Raheem Morris. And I think all the Falcons fans are now have a quarterback to cheer for since the days of Matt Ryan there. And you know what? I'm very excited for all Falcons fans. He's going to fill up the Mercedes-Benz Dome stadium there. And very excited there for Falcons fans. And not to mention the matchup is very juicy. The Giants are awful. They're definitely not going to be in the playoffs, as well. The Falcons are trying to win their division. So definitely like that there. Start your Falcons for sure, especially those pass catchers. And Justin, one last thing in daily fantasy, he is only 4,500 there, his salary in daily fantasy. And if you can get him, you can definitely throw in your Amon-Ra, your Jamar Chase, stack him up with a Jefferson, a couple, decent running backs, and you have a tasty lineup, a holiday-giving lineup that'll give you some presents there. I know I talked about, but that's Penix there. For me, I'm going to go with Baker Mayfield, who you're going to have to wait till Sunday night. I know if you guys are in the fantasy playoffs, that's a little bit of a big ask, but he's in Dallas. And I think this is going to be a potential mini shootout there. You know me, I love those Cowboys quarterbacks when they play in Jerry World, and Baker's going to have to match it. So there might be a chance where they kind of, yes, they're going to lean a little bit on the running game, but he's going to get his dump-off passes to those two running backs there. You got Mike Evans, who has scored a touchdown in his last, 2 to 3 matchups in Jerry World. He does good against the Cowboys overall, especially that wild card matchup a few years ago in Tom Brady's final game. Had a fantastic matchup. I know in the game where Dak Prescott got hurt that week 1 in 2022, Mike Evans scored like a ball touchdown. It was pretty nice. And I think a few years ago, I'm looking at here, Mike Evans even scored a touchdown with Jameis Winston in a blowout loss. So those Tampa Bay quarterbacks are still going to get you some points there against the Cowboys in Cowboy Stadium. So I love me some Baker Mayfield. Not to mention, Justin just talked about him. Jace McMillan there, he is on fire. I even think Kate Alton has a pretty decent game there. So give me Baker Mayfield as my starting quarterback of the week.
Yeah, and I think, with these two guys we mentioned, with Penix and Mayfield, both guys that I think they got a lot of crap for when they were drafted. People were like, dang, they jumped. I think Darnold was the favorite that year where Baker got picked, and it was a shock. They're like, oh, they went Baker, they went him. Obviously, it didn't work out in Cleveland, but now looking at him, bam. And then with Penix, the crap that the Falcons got for drafting him after paying Kirk, this is like the total weeks and year to like write off all the haters. Or don't the haters write you off, you don't write back kind of thing. That's what Penix said when they made the natty. But but with Baker, I agree. I think this is a great play. After looking at last week in a tough matchup on the road, he threw 4 touchdowns. And one big thing I realized is at first, they were like, because it's a big thing. Evans has gotten 1,000 yards receiving every season of his career. But after missing a handful of games with that hamstring injury, he was like, I think he's 479 away from last week. But then after going off, he can achieve this number with 3 games left. So I think he's going to be like, hey, Baker, let's go. I'm going to get my 1,000 yards. And that only helps Baker Mayfield's fantasy output. So I love that. I think Baker's going to dominate. And I think Cooper Rush in Dallas is going to be able to score to compete a little bit. Yeah. So I don't think it's just going to be like a complete blowout and then they're going to run the football. I think Baker's going to want to throw, and I think it's going to be very good. I love that pick there. To running back, same game. I have Bucky Irving, though, and he gets catches, he gets runs. He's been phenomenal. He's probably been one of the best surprises of the NFL season this year. A guy that was a backup has cemented his role and has really become the one for that team. I know Rachaad White still gets his touches, but if you look at this matchup, Dallas is bottom 5 against running backs on the season, and I think that Tampa Bay is going to be with the league too, so they're going to be able to use Bucky Irving as they like to, and I just think it's golden. It's a golden play. Hopefully, you're in the playoffs with this. I know he had a good week last week, but week 14 he had that game where he got injured, didn't score much. But if you're in the playoffs, you got to start Bucky.
Yeah, Justin. A couple weeks ago, one of my takeaways was Bucky Irving is going to be a league winner, and here we are. This is the time where he stays being a league winner. Like last week, over 100 yards there against that tough Chargers defense. And looking at Bucky Irving there, this is how fantasy leagues are won there with these running backs that just catch fire in these past, the final games there. And I like it against this Cowboys defense that, give a ton of fantasy points to opposing running backs there. So definitely like that there. Not to mention, Chase Brown scored a touchdown. Again, I had a good game against him a few weeks ago. The week before on Thanksgiving, I think Tracy was able to score a touchdown with the Giants there. And then a few weeks ago, who can forget that Joe Mixon masterclass? Not to mention Derrick Henry earlier this year. And, with the Lions double two-headed monster, they were able to shred those Cowboys there. So the Cowboys there at home literally give away Christmas presents, give away fantasy points there to opposing running backs. For me, I'm going to go with Breece Hall. Nothing really much to say here, but you got to remember that a lot of people picked Breece Hall in the first round there. And so I think that here it is. This is now the time of year where Breece Hall is going to have to take off here, right? And I like his goal line look, like the red zone look. I think that Rodgers is going to be able to move the football a lot this week. This is going to be a potential shootout there. The Rams, they need to make the playoffs. They're in the late playoff push. They are known to kind of make late playoff pushes. I know a few years ago, I was able to win a fantasy league with them pushing with Todd Gurley and Jared Goff. And last year, people were able to win leagues with them pushing with Kyron Williams and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua had a league-winning push last year, and I think this is kind of the same thing this year. Like, Puka Nacua had 90 yards last week and 7 catches in the rain in a game where a touchdown wasn't scored here. So can you imagine what's going to happen in MetLife? And on the other side of the football, Aaron Rodgers is going to need to move the football. And Breece Hall is only at 700 yards, 722 on the year. And I know my guy is going to want to get to 1,000 yards with just 3 games remaining. They're not making the playoffs, so I know in Breece Hall's mind, he's like, man, I'm leaving here with something, right? I'm leaving here with 1,000 yards, right? And Breece Hall only has 5 rushing touchdowns, so I expect those numbers to be pumped up there. I love Breece Hall in the red zone specifically. 10-yard line 5. He's going to get those goal line carries there on that week. Kind of Rams up front. They don't have Aaron Donald anymore, so give me Breece Hall.
I think Breece Hall is in for a good game. He's due for a good game. The sad story is most Breece Hall managers probably aren't at the stage of their season, and if you are, congratulations.
Yeah.
This is the week, hopefully, that it pays off for you. It's funny. The same kind of story happened last year with Breece. He had a really bad game against the Dolphins in the first round of the playoffs. I know Breece didn't do too bad last week, but no, he wasn't winning anybody their week. But he had like 2 points. I had him. This was a personal story. And then, you get eliminated and you're like, crap. But then the next 2 weeks, he's the RB1. So
Wow.
I think this is kind of his time that I agree, it's back part of the season. They're not making the playoffs. So this is their last couple of weeks of the season. And the fact that the Jets brought in Braylon Allen and they've been using Isaiah Davis. I think Breece is like, I'm the guy, right? Like, what are we doing here? And, if you look at last week, some people are concerned, but I caution that because it was his first week back from his injury that he had been, that had been nagging him. So I think another week back in a plus matchup, last week was kind of weird. Obviously that rain game. So Garindo didn't do great. He got right under 10 fantasy points. But hey, we saw Saquon go nuts a couple weeks before that. We know how average to under average this this rushing defense is. So I agree. I think Breece Hall is in for a good week. Moving to wide receiver, I have a pair of Jaguars. I wanted to just say one because this is usually our receiver spot, but I think the tight end deserves a look as well. So I'm talking about Brian Thomas Jr. and Brenton Strange. So if you don't know, Evan Ingram is out for the season with a torn labrum. So that leaves Brenton Strange, who last week had 12 targets, 11 catches, and 73 yards. I think that is phenomenal in a game against the New York Jets, which is, to me, a much better defense than the Las Vegas Raiders. And so he's got a great matchup. And I think that Mac Jones is stepping into to be just be better than what we've been wanting to see. And then with the Raiders against tight ends, they're 30th. So they are one of the worst, bottom three, as you can see. And Brian Thomas is just, there's not too much I can share for him. He has been phenomenal. And he's got a very solid matchup. I mean, last week, 10 catches, 105 yards, 2 scores. You need him in your lineup if you are at this stage in the season. Just play him. I think both are great plays. If you want to do DFS, I bet Brenton Strange isn't going to cost you much either.
Yeah, Justin, man, this is one thing that I love about this season is Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, he is playing carefree in the world, doesn't have his starting quarterback. The team's not going to make the playoffs. The running backs have been abysmal this year. And you got Mac Jones, who's scrappy, but not all that great. But he doesn't care. He goes out there and plays week in and week out. I mean, that's what I love about Brian Thomas Jr. And you know what? I am interested in drafting him in the 3rd or 4th round next year. He might get stolen maybe a little earlier. Who knows? But, man, I will draft him next year as my wide receiver 1 and be okay with it, man. This guy is playing with the carefree in the world. He doesn't complain, doesn't bicker. Not to, throw shade at his former LSU teammate Neighbors, who his team is also having a bad year. But, this guy right here, Brian Thomas Jr., he's quiet. He reminds me of like Ayuk before Ayuk, started having his issues. He kind of reminds me of a more stronger Ayuk, to be honest. But you know what? I just love Brian Thomas Jr. I love everything about this guy, his character. There's so many things that Jacksonville has gone through this season. And you know what? He doesn't seem to, it's whatever to him. He still goes out there and balls and has great games, gets his targets. And you know what? That's what we love. And he has a juicy matchup against the Raiders. And I think this is in Vegas, I believe, correct? And I don't think they'll have to worry about any weather conditions there. And Brenton Strange could have a good game. The only thing is that I'm seeing that he did have a mild AC joint sprain. He was limited in practice today. But if he's able to go, Justin, definitely like this a lot. I think that the Raiders defense is awful, obviously, and they're not really trying. As where Doug Peterson is kind of coaching for his job because he knows that, hey, and when I get back Trevor Lawrence next year and Evan Ingram, and if we can figure out a running back room, maybe trade ETN and elevate Tank, or maybe draft a running back. We might even need a running back. Then maybe, we can turn things around there with our franchise quarterback. And we have a franchise wide receiver there. I think Christian Kirk could stay after the during free agency. So I think that Doug Peterson knows that. So he's just trying to win out here and just finish the season on a good note there. So definitely like those Jaguars pass catchers there. For me, I also have a pair, but they're not teammates there. But they are Ohio State wide receivers, former Ohio State, products there. And that is Jason and Marvin. Now, first of all, I want to go with, talk about Marvin. He is more of my premier start of the week. I love Marvin this week. CeeDee Lamb went off against him last week. And, Carolina, it really isn't a good passing defense anyways. I think DeAndre Hopkins was able to score a touchdown against him a few weeks ago. And Marvin kind of reminds me in some ways of CeeDee Lamb. He has some elements of speed, the size, the length, the body's, style, the way they play football at wide receiver. They kind of play the same. And I do love Marvin to kind of emulate on what, CeeDee Lamb was able to do last week. And I think that the Panther or the Cardinals are going to need to have a fantastic offensive showing to win and to, stay in the playoff race there to win the division. And then JSN, it's really all dependent on if Geno Smith plays. If he does, I like JSN now there. And in fact, Justin, I like JSN now moving forward in the future of Seattle as far as number 1 receivers for the Seahawks. DK Metcalf has officially taken a step back, and so has Tyler Lockett. We known that coming into the season with Lockett. But with DK Metcalf, he has not had a 100-yard game, I don't think, since like week 2 or 3 against the Patriots. So, and now Jackson Smith and Jigba is 6 yards away from his first 1,000-yard season there. and he's going to take advantage of it there. DK Metcalf is barely hitting 840 there. And the touchdowns, I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba has got 5 to DK's 3. So even if Sam Howell were to step in and be the quarterback for the Seahawks, Sam Howell did lead the league in passing yards up until Thanksgiving last year. Want to give that a little fun fact to Dwayne Nation. He had Terry McLaurin and Dotson there. So I think he can kind of work things there with Jackson Smith-Njigba and DK Metcalf. But if Geno Smith plays, he's good to go. That's even better for JSN owners. So Marvin Harrison at Carolina, I think it's kind of a make it or break it game for Marvin Harrison there, and I think Kyler Murray is going to feed him. The last couple weeks, it's been Trey McBride getting that heavy volume. Even Michael Wilson scored a few weeks ago, and I think it's been a pattern all year where Marvin Harrison has a good game, and then you don't hear from him for a couple weeks. Has a good game, and then once again you don't hear from him a couple weeks. And so the last couple weeks you haven't really heard from Marvin. This is the week where you do.
Yeah, I like both plays. I do. I think I even like JSN more than Marvin, in my opinion. With Marvin, if you watch that game against the Patriots, he was getting targeted. He had 3 end zone targets, all either poorly placed balls or deflected by the defender. So he was being looked at in the golden area where you could score 6 points. So I think this is the week, though, he can get in. And the Cardinals are another team. Their backs are against the wall. They're right outside the playoffs. They need to get some victories. And I know they can rely on James Conner, who had a phenomenal game last week, but Marvin needs something. He needs some juice to, push him the rest of the season. As for JSN, I think that this could be a kind of like that first Rams game that he had where he had 180, and a score kind of thing. I think he is in line for a huge performance. Obviously the Vikings are 32nd against wide receivers. And so I think with JSN, I think this is his time, man. I mean, he's gotten double digits in full PPR leagues in, I think, 7 or 8 straight games. But I think this is a big boom game. I think Seattle and them are going to go back and forth, and I think it's going to be JSN focused as, DK is still questionable heading into this week. So I like both there. Moving to our sour part of our episode, as you always know, we got to talk about our sits of the week, and I have Brian Robinson Jr. Last week was weird. It was upsetting because I was playing against, Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels in a couple leagues, and I was like, why are they passing it so much? And it had me a question. I was like, is Brian Robinson fully healthy? I was like, they were up by 10 to 13, and they were throwing it still in the fourth quarter, and I was like, where is Brian Robinson? But he also just didn't look that effective, and so it has me worried going into a game against the Philadelphia Eagles where, hey, the Eagles are one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL. They stuffed up Najee Harris last week. And I know it's in Washington, which gives him a little bit more grace, but I just think that it's going to be a rough week for Brian Robinson. Washington, really, to me, since that week where they won on the Hail Mary, they haven't been very impressive to me. And I know Brian Robinson's had a game or two that's been good since that game. But I'm not excited for it. I know he's all alone in that backfield, but against that tough matchup, he's a sit for me.
Yeah, Justin, this Washington offense has lost a little bit of their spark since Austin Eckler got placed on IR. They were kind of a little bit of a nice duo there. But Brian Robinson's touches in the red zone have been awful. It's gotten to the point where now Jaden Daniels is getting the rushing touches there in the red zone. And not to mention, they're playing the Eagles, who allowed the least total amount of yards. They're top 3 in allowing the fewest yards in all of pro football there. It's could be a chance where maybe the Eagles go up a lot. They're hot right now. Maybe Barkley, A.J. Brown get a couple touchdowns. And Jaden Daniels in this offense are kind of playing from behind. They're throwing and throwing. Not to mention, like I just said, that Jaden Daniels gets the rushing touches, right? It's not like they have a pure pocket quarterback there, pocket passer quarterback, and so that really limits his touches. And then even if they're playing behind, they might add McNichols there, I think, and majority of those passing plays if they're down. And so I definitely like that. That's a good take. And I had Brian Robinson in a parlay last week. He was my last leg that I needed to win, and he didn't score that touchdown I was hoping he'd get. And so very disappointing there, especially against a Saints defense, Justin, that gave up the eighth, ninth most fantasy points to opposing running backs. I mean, even Javonte Williams had a great game against them. And Brian Robinson, he's a pure rusher. Could not get a touchdown. Unbelievable. For me, Justin, I'm going to go with Jared Goff. Now, Jared Goff hit 55 fantasy points last week, as we kind of all expected. But here's the thing, Justin. Jared Goff, he hasn't really been the best quarterback in cold weather temperatures game. Check this out, Justin. In 12 games, in colder weather games, meaning 39 degrees or colder, which checking the weather here in Soldier Field, it's looking like it's going to be 25 degrees and colder. Not to mention it's going to be snowing on Friday. Going to get a little sunny on Saturday, but still there's going to be some leftover snow, I believe. But check this out. In 12 games with 39 degrees or colder, Jared Goff, 9 interceptions to barely 11 touchdowns there. Not really all that good there. 7 yards per attempt, which isn't all that good. And there's a stat where his QBR was in the low 30s in his first 7 games there. So in his first 10 games in the cold weather, barely hitting 30 QBR, which is very concerning there. But you know what? Another thing is that David Montgomery isn't going to be able to be there to get those, bowling ball yards there. And they're going to be relying a lot on Gibbs, which I love me some Jahmyr Gibbs, but I even hate this matchup for him just because it's like he's going to need to be in every play there. And I don't know if Craig Reynolds can even move the ball there. This matchup, it just screams defensive showdown there for me. Maybe Amon-Ra has a decent game, like 8 catches, 75 yards. But you know what, Justin? I just don't think Jared Goff is going to be able to push the ball a lot. He's just not that good on the road there. Not to mention he threw 5 interceptions at the Texans, at my beloved Texans. And then in the victory against Green Bay on the road, it was a weather game too. He barely hit 145 passing yards there. So just something to consider there in the cold weather. It is a defensive, divisional, showdown. And they don't have David Montgomery to get those, hard yards there where they're running the football there. And so that just concerns me. And not to mention Sam Laporta. I mean, Justin, where is he this year? I mean, I want to give you some credit there. You kind of mentioned that he's going to be one of the bigger letdowns this year. I mean, he's the reason why the Jared Goff's, he hasn't been all that good on the road.
Yeah, this is tough because I can totally see it. Goff's not known for being, in poor weather, as you mentioned, and are in cold weather, period. And the fact that Monty's not there, how much is this offense going to change? I think he's going to be okay. I think he'll get you like 14 to 18, maybe 14 to 20. But if you look at his last 3 games against the Bears in particular, he's averaged only 206 passing yards. And in those 3 games, he's had 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So it's not very pretty. So I agree. He might be a guy. It might be hard to move off him if, last week coming off a 50-point, you're like, how do I move off of that? So yeah, I guess that's tough there to move off of him. I would start guys like Sam Darnold or Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield for sure. Would you start? Yeah, I would start Stafford as well. So like he's in that range though. He's in that tier.
Kyler too.
I would probably start. God, Kyler.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Even Kyler over him, but but this offense could change a little. It could be more pass to the running back centric with Jahmyr being on the field more. But yeah, that one's gonna be tough. I could see a possible, like, how Darnold did very good against the Bears like 3 or 4 weeks ago in Chicago, where Addison had a crazy game kind of thing. I could see maybe like a big Jameson Williams touchdown that makes Jared Goff's day not too bad kind of thing. But I see your point. So I like that. And then moving to our kickers of the week, our starts for the kicker position. I have Chase McLaughlin on Sunday night. We're just Buccaneers. We have so much fandom of the Buccaneers this week because we got Baker, you have Baker, I got Bucky, and I got McLaughlin. I just think that they're going to be in scoring position a lot, none much else, and they're going to be indoors. So I got McLaughlin.
Yeah, great pick there. Not much to say. McLaughlin's been one of the more underrated kickers this year. For me, I'm going to go with Young Ho Koo there. And I think that he is home against the Giants team, and there is actually breaking news that Koo is actually on IR. So maybe not Young Ho Koo. I didn't realize that. So I'm actually going to change it here, and let me go with Jason Sanders here actually for the Miami Dolphins. I think that he's been pretty good this year, and he could have had Justin an extra field goal this past weekend in Houston, but with a penalty, it kind of erased Jason Sanders' field goal there. And so give me Jason Sanders as my kicker of the week.
Yeah, I like Sanders. I think Miami's not going to be powerful enough to get just a bunch of touchdowns. They could get in that range for some field goals like we saw the Rams do last week with 4 field goals against the 49ers. Yeah, with the Koo news, that happened recently too, before this recording, that he was placed on IR. So yeah, that's rough. But I think Sanders though is a good play for sure at home. But yes, Dwayne Nation, those are our starts and sits of Week 16 of the NFL season. We got more to come though, so just keep watching. And if you have any particular questions, we're here for you. But yes, take our advice, put it to good use, and we'll see you in another episode to help you with your Week 17 matchups and your championships. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, and Genoa, send us out.
Yo, Dewey Nation, this was our starts and sits of the week. We got one more after this week. Hopefully, we are leading you guys to a fantasy championship. So let us know how your matchups go there. Let us know if you're in the playoffs still. Let us know who your matchups are. Let us know if these are against your close family, friends, or rivals. Let us know what's in stake for winning. And you guys, if you guys do a top 3 finish there, you guys could still potentially be playing for third place there. And then kind of you're like your money backs essentially. So let us know what how the matchups go, what you need to happen, what you're facing, and we like to see what all fantasy matchups there kind of take out there, leading to you guys' championship there. So we love you guys. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.